Because we're not talking about restraining the gentleladies from Michigan's ability to speak. As an American citizen, we're not talking about punishing her, putting her in jail. What we're talking about is whether a member of the United States House of Representatives, whether a member of this body representing this nation is justified in putting forward a defense of the actions of Hamas terrorists that murdered.
The House chamber erupted in tension and emotion as lawmakers clashed over a resolution to censure Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan. What began as a procedural matter quickly evolved into a moral confrontation about war, humanity, and the limits of free speech. Members rose one after another, some accusing Tlaib of defending extremism, others insisting she was being unfairly targeted for speaking truth to power. The atmosphere was thick with anger, conviction, and history, as voices carried across party lines. This wasn't just a debate over one representative's words. It was a test of America's conscience, unfolding live before the nation.
Innocent Israeli citizens is holding United States citizens and Israelis hostage, and in her own language was defending on October 8th, a mere 24 hours into the brutal and barbaric attacks in which babies were beheaded. Babies were placed into ovens, literally. Moms were raped in a house while their babies were put in an oven.
As the debate intensified, lawmakers wrestled with the line between moral duty and freedom of expression. Supporters of the censure accused Tlaib of using language that seemed to excuse violence, especially in the aftermath of Hamas's attack on Israel. Her defenders, however, saw the move as political retribution, a punishment for empathy. They argued she was advocating peace and mourning innocent lives on all sides of the conflict. Each word spoken in that chamber carried the weight of generations, and every silence revealed how divided America remains on the Israel-Palestine question. The session became a mirror of the nation's ongoing struggle between justice, speech, and compassion.
As a fellow New Yorker, I think one of the things that we should talk about here is also one of the disgusting legacies after 9/11 has been the targeting and racism against Muslim Americans throughout the United States of America, and this is an extension of that legacy. Consistency, there is nothing consistent with the Republican Party's continued attack except for the racism and incitement of violence against women of color in this body. I had a member of the Republican caucus threaten my life, and you all and the Republican caucus rewarded him.
Then came Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, resolute and impassioned. She accused Republicans of hypocrisy, reminding the chamber that some of those calling for Tlaib's censure had once excused far more extreme rhetoric. Her voice trembled with fury as she argued that this wasn't about morality or anti-Semitism. It was about silencing women of color who dare to challenge power. Her fiery defense drew applause from Democrats and scorn from the other side, perfectly capturing a Congress that has learned how to shout but forgotten how to listen. In that moment, the chamber felt less like a legislative body and more like a moral battleground.
Was one of the most prestigious committee assignments in this Congress. Don't tell me this is about consistency. Don't tell me that this is about a condemnation of anti-Semitic remarks when you have a member of the Republican caucus who has talked about Jewish space lasers and an entire amount of tropes and also elevated her to some of the highest committee.
Ilhan Omar, long familiar with controversy herself, rose next to defend Tlaib. Her words were personal, rooted in shared experiences of exile, survival, and resilience. Omar spoke of what it means to be both an American and a refugee, to love this country while still carrying the pain of another homeland. She argued that Tlaib's voice was not dangerous but necessary, a reminder that empathy should never be a crime. Her tone was calm yet piercing, as she accused her colleagues of turning fear into politics. "We were sent here to represent people," she said, "not to weaponize pain." The chamber fell silent for a moment, struck by the raw humanity in her words.
In this body, this is about targeting women of color in the United States of America. Don't tell me because I didn't get a single
Time has expired.
My life was threatened. Thank you.
Desperation. So desperate to distract the American people from their total inability to govern. The GOP is now doing what it is best at.
When Tlaib finally took the floor, the room quieted. Her voice broke as she spoke about her grandmother in Palestine, about family, loss, and the hope for simple human dignity. Palestinians are not disposable, she declared. It wasn't a speech filled with slogans or politics, but with sorrow and truth. She condemned both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, insisting that every innocent life, Israeli or Palestinian, deserves equal compassion. Her remarks were not defiant but deeply human, leaving even her harshest critics momentarily still. It was a moment of vulnerability that transcended party lines.
Weaponizing hate against a black, beautiful Muslim woman. Congresswoman Omar's lived experience as a refugee and a child of survivor of war should be welcomed on this committee. It is needed. When you can't pass any bills that actually improve the people's lives, they turn Congress into a place of fear-mongering hate. It is so painful to watch.
But compassion didn't shield Tlaib from what came next. Lawmakers from Georgia, Texas, and Maryland took turns rebuking her remarks, accusing her of minimizing terrorism and dishonoring victims of the October 7th attack. They described scenes of horror, families slaughtered, civilians burned alive, and argued that Tlaib's words blurred the moral boundary between empathy and justification. Their tone was somber yet unyielding, claiming that a member of Congress bears the highest duty to clarity. For them, her statements crossed that line, and accountability was not optional.
How ironic that the so-called lovers of personal freedom are now moving to censor Congresswoman Omar in the same week they introduced a bill to ban federal employees from engaging in censorship. The free speech warriors today. The hypocrisy is obvious to the American people. You are showing who you all are, really.
The debate soon grew larger than Tlaib herself. It became a national argument over what free speech truly means in America. Her defenders warned that punishing her for compassion was a betrayal of the very freedoms Congress was sworn to protect. Her opponents countered that freedom must coexist with responsibility, and that moral neutrality in the face of terrorism was unacceptable. The question loomed over every speech. When does empathy become endorsement? In that chamber, the answer seemed to depend entirely on who was speaking and which side you stood on.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Will not be silenced.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Omar,
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
That our country is failing you today in this chamber.
The gentlewoman is no longer recognized, and the gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
The gentlelady cannot, as a member of Congress.
Then a congressman from Texas rose to speak, calm, deliberate, and measured. He expressed sorrow for innocent Palestinians, but called Tlaib's framing of U.S. policy factually wrong and morally reckless. He said describing Israel's defense as genocide insulted millions of Americans who stand for democracy and peace. His message walked the line between empathy and reprimand, insisting that truth cannot be sacrificed for emotion. This is not about silencing speech, he said. It's about defending honesty and moral clarity. His words resonated with those who believe compassion should never come at the expense of truth.
Be standing up and telling the world that what we saw unfold in attacking Israel is justified. We can't.
Mr. Chair, do you know what it's like to fear rising hate crimes, to know how Islamophobia and anti-Semitism makes us all less safe, and worry that your own child might suffer the horrors that 6-year-old Wadia did in Illinois? I can't believe I have to say this. Palestinian people are not disposable.
By night's end, it was clear that this was about far more than one congresswoman. It was a reckoning over how America talks about war, who defines patriotism, and who gets punished for questioning it. Supporters of the censure claimed they were protecting the moral foundation of the nation after a brutal terrorist attack. Critics warned that it marked a dangerous moment where dissent could be branded as disloyalty. The divide ran deeper than policy. It was philosophical, a struggle between national loyalty and human empathy, between what feels right and what power demands.
We are human beings, just like anyone else. My city, my grandmother, like all Palestinians, just wants to live her life with freedom and human dignity we all deserve. Speaking up to save lives, Mr. Chair, no matter faith, no matter ethnicity, should not be controversial in this chamber. Cries of Palestinian and Israeli children sound no different to me. Why?
As the final vote approached, the atmosphere in the chamber grew heavier. The resolution passed, but at the cost of trust and unity. Supporters left believing they had upheld moral order. Opponents walked out shaken and furious, convinced democracy itself had been wounded. The debate will be remembered not for the vote count, but for the emotion, anguish, and conviction that filled every corner of that hall. This was never just about Rashida Tlaib. It was about the soul of American politics, whether compassion and accountability can ever truly coexist.
What I don't understand is why the cries of Palestinians sound different to you all. We cannot lose our shared humanity, Mr. Chair. I hear the voices of advocates in Israel, in Palestine, across America, and around the world for peace. I am inspired by the courageous survivors in Israel who have lost loved ones, yet are calling for a ceasefire and an end to violence. I am grateful.
As the censure reached its peak, chaos once again overtook the floor. Lawmakers shouted over one another, "Shame," "Sit down," "Order," their words colliding in a chorus of outrage. Ilhan Omar tried to speak, condemning what she called the politics of fear, but her microphone was abruptly cut off. The speaker's gavel pounded in vain. The noise wasn't just procedural. It was personal, emotional, raw. The chamber had become a reflection of a fractured democracy. When Omar was finally allowed to speak, her tone shifted the energy entirely.
To the people, for the peace movement, with countless Jewish Americans across the country standing up and lovingly saying, "Not in our name." We will continue to call for a ceasefire, Mr. Chair, for the immediate delivery of critical humanitarian aid to Gaza, for the release of all hostages and those arbitrarily detained, and for every American to come home. We will continue to work for a real lasting peace that upholds human rights and dignity of all people.
She spoke of her past, of fleeing war, of surviving displacement, and reminded the chamber that suffering does not belong to one people alone. You cannot erase humanity based on geography, she said. Her words landed like quiet thunder, both as a defense of Tlaib and a warning to history. Omar's message was clear. When empathy disappears, cruelty takes its place. Her speech was brief but unforgettable, a reminder of why her voice continues to both inspire and divide. Republicans, however, were unmoved, insisting this was not about silencing anyone, but about upholding moral responsibility in public office.
And centers in peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians, and censures no one, and ensures that no person, no child has to suffer or live in fear of violence. 71% of Michigan Democrats support a ceasefire. So you can try to censure me, but you can't silence their voices. I urge my colleagues to join with the majority of Americans and support a ceasefire now to save as many lives as possible.
You cannot defend terrorists and sit in Congress, one lawmaker declared bluntly, his voice rising above the noise. He invoked the horrors of October 7th, demanding accountability for anyone who seemed to minimize those atrocities. His anger was raw, born from grief, but also from politics. Democrats fired back just as forcefully. Omar, AOC, and Cori Bush stood united, accusing Republicans of hypocrisy and moral double standards. "This is selective morality," shouted AOC, her frustration echoing across the chamber. To her, this was not justice. It was political theater masquerading as righteousness.
I was wrong, by the way, when I said that it must have taken a long time to find somebody who hadn't voted for censorship from the other side of the aisle. You didn't find it. The gentleman from the other side of the aisle actually did vote for censorship on a First Amendment route. So I find it rather funny. We just researched it, and unless my sources are wrong, the vast majority of the other side of the aisle actually voted for censorship based on a First Amendment right. I wanted to also say that my heart goes out to the Palestinian people. Truly does.
The Democratic benches erupted in applause while Republicans sat in defiance. A perfect snapshot of how deeply divided the House has become. Tlaib's offenders shifted the focus back to humanity, reminding their colleagues that most Michigan Democrats support a ceasefire and that millions of Americans are tired of endless war. Censuring her won't stop the suffering, one lawmaker said. It only silences those who care. The chamber fell quiet for a moment. Even compassion, it seemed, had become controversial in Washington.
President Biden must listen to and represent all of us, not just some of us. I urge the president to have the courage to call for a ceasefire and the end of killings. Thank you, and I yield.
All right. Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Maryland reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
If this was about calling for a ceasefire, we would not have these proceedings.
Outside Congress, the storm spread. News outlets replayed Tlaib's tearful speech on loop, while commentators debated whether she was courageous or reckless. Social media erupted into its own battleground. Hashtags, arguments, viral clips. To some, Tlaib was a truth-teller unafraid to confront injustice. To others, she was dangerously irresponsible. The conversation that began in Congress had now engulfed the nation.
Especially those people that were bombed in the hospital, which my colleague knows wasn't from the Israelis. And yet, the statement is contrary to that, even though our intel was very clear, as was our president. Very clear. That's what this debate is about. With that, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 4 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Georgia for his...
Ilhan Omar trended nationwide, too. Her emotional defense of Tlaib circulating across platforms. The digital debate mirrored the one in Congress, divided, passionate, and deeply personal. Speaking later to reporters, Omar said the moment revealed a painful truth. When Muslim women speak about injustice, we are punished, not heard. She argued that her critics were applying double standards, pointing out how similar remarks from others were often forgiven or ignored.
And with respect to the gentleman from Maryland, I understand the perspectives with respect to free speech. And I certainly wish to always stand aside protection of free speech in this country. But this goes well beyond that. Because we're not talking about restraining the gentleladies from Michigan's ability to speak. As an American citizen, we're not talking about punishing her, putting her in jail. What we're talking about is whether a member of the United States House of Representatives, whether a member of this body, representing this nation.
Her comments reignited a wider discussion about bias in American politics, about who is allowed to show empathy and who is accused of extremism for doing so. What began as a vote on a single representative had transformed into a reckoning on equality, belonging, and identity. Historians later noted that few censure debates in modern times carried such moral weight. It wasn't merely political theater. It was a reflection of America's deepest divides.
Is justified in putting forward a defense of the actions of Hamas terrorists, murdered innocent Israeli citizens, is holding United States citizens and Israelis hostage, and in her own language was defending on October 8th, a mere 24 hours into the brutal and barbaric attacks in which babies were beheaded, babies were placed into ovens, literally.
In truth, that night exposed something larger, America's internal conflict over war, speech, and conscience. The proceedings felt less like governance and more like an emotional trial of pain, principle, and power. Through it all, the names Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar became symbols of how personal politics can become when empathy meets ideology. When the final vote was called, the room fell silent, not in peace, but in exhaustion.
Moms were raped in a house while their babies were put in an oven. A documented account, video evidence, And this is dismissed as resistance to an apartheid state. My problem is that gentlelady is also referring to, quote, Joe Biden supporting the genocide of the Palestinian people. The gentlelady has put forward that by virtue of the United States of America funding in solidarity the people of Israel in defense of their right to exist.
The censure passed narrowly. Some members applauded. Others walked out. Tlaib stood motionless, tears in her eyes but defiance in her posture. Her allies gathered around her in solidarity as opponents claimed victory. Yet deep down it was clear no one had truly won. The vote left scars that would not heal soon, proof that even in democracy's highest halls, unity can fracture beyond repair.
That by virtue of our position as Americans, standing in front of that flag in this chamber representing 330 million Americans, that by funding and supporting Israel, we are somehow perpetuating the call for violence that we saw unfold right before our eyes on October 7th. In the most brutal and heinous acts some of us have ever seen. I do not doubt the gentlelady's sincerity of her concern for her home people and concerns about the attacks on the people of Gaza. I had some people who called into question that I would put out my public support for my former colleague, Justin Amash, who lost cousins in a church, receiving missile fire into a building next to a church. I genuinely pray for the people of Israel, the people of Gaza, the people throughout the world that are now dealing with all of this. But the gentlelady cannot, as a member of Congress, be standing up and telling the world that what we saw unfold in attacking Israel is justified. We can't.
In the days that followed, the debate grew into something far greater, a national soul search. Americans were left to ask hard questions. Can empathy coexist with accountability? Can criticism of Israel exist without being branded anti-Semitism? And can voices like Tlaib's and Omar survive in a political system that punishes dissent? Whether one saw the censure as justice or suppression, the message was undeniable. This wasn't just a vote. It was a mirror held up to America's identity crisis, revealing a nation still struggling to balance truth, justice, and freedom.